Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Expo Factor. I'm your host, Lee Arley, and today we're diving into a subject that doesn't get talked about enough in the world of exhibitions, and that's mental health on the show floor. Let's face it, events are exciting, but let's be honest, they can also be very exhausting. Tight deadlines, endless to-do lists, last-minute curveballs, handling multiple suppliers, and the pressure to deliver a flawless experience can take their toll on even the most seasoned event planner or booth team. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined today by Petra Velzeboer, psychotherapist, speaker, CEO, and author of two powerful books on mental health and digital well-being. Petra brings both professional expertise and lived experience, and in this conversation, we explore how you can recognize the early signs of burnout, the importance of self-awareness, and the practical steps you can take to stay resilient before, during, and after an event. So whether you're running a booth, planning an exhibition, or even attending as a delegate, this episode will give you strategies to thrive under pressure, not just survive it. So let's get right into it and say hello to Petra. Welcome to the Expo Factor. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. As soon as we spoke, we were introduced several weeks ago, and I thought Petra, having had a quick sneak preview of your book, and I thought she's definitely worth having on the podcast because there are so many mental well-being issues in our exhibition and trade show industry that I thought I've got to have you on. So thank you very much for taking the time out and making an appearance on the Expo Factor for me. So as always, with the previous guests, I always like to kick off with learning a bit more about your story in terms of how you've got here today. And so I know that you've got a very interesting background, things that you talk about on your website and also in your book. So tell us a bit more about your journey so far.
Great question. And I'll try and give the high level kind of short answer because there's lots of places we could go. But I guess the intro for who I am now is, like you said, I've written a couple of books. I'm a psychotherapist by background. I've worked in youth mental health, so with young people who've been kicked out of education and young offenders, and then have been working in employee well-being and thinking about cultures and leadership, that sort of thing for the last sort of 8 years or so. So I run a business that's all about training and development and supporting organizations to, I guess, create mentally healthy cultures. And I say that very much with like an idea of what's the North Star? What are we
Yeah,
trying to get to? So rather than what do we do when people are stressed or burnt out, it's like, what are we actually working towards? What's the
yeah,
culture we want to create? And then what's possible in the world today. My recent book is on digital well-being, right? So it's
yeah,
thinking about technology and the fast pace of change and how much that is adding another layer of stress for people. And then to give you the context, like, many of us that are in the mental health or well-being space, it's deeply personal.
yeah,
You don't just go to school and think I'm going to work in mental health. It's usually a life thing that happens that affects us. For me, I mean, I was born and raised in a religious cult, so you couldn't think of a more alternative sort of setting. I'm Dutch by passport, even though I know people think I'm Canadian or South African, is what I get all the time. And I grew up in there was some good bits, like there was community. I grew up traveling. We lived in communes. Then there was a shadow side of not going to school, thinking the world was going to end, and very much having my life path sort of set out for me. And so
yeah,
that led to my own rock bottom moments and sort of leaving the cult and then thinking, who am I? And spiraling into addiction, depression, and then slowly, I guess, helping myself first. So getting
yeah,
sober and learning about things. And then that influenced my career and how I was like, we can teach ourselves to be happy.
yeah,
What? Like no one ever
yeah,
told me that. And so it's become
yeah.
my mission to support other people through what they're going through.
Oh, wow, fantastic. What a journey.
Right.
So, what was the moment, what was the trigger that made you want to get out of that position that you were in?
I mean, I think yes and no. So I
Okay.
fell pregnant with my son, who is now
Yeah.
21. And so that was a pivotal kind of, oh, is this the future I want for him? It was definitely a catalyst moment. But just like leaving a toxic relationship, it's often
Yeah.
not just one day to the next, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
often a decade or, it's years or months of you going, huh, like questioning things and then going, oh, it will be really scary to change. And you don't consciously think these things, but you pull back from it because you're like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, if I think in that way, that means I have to do something about it. And remember,
Yeah.
I didn't have an education. I didn't have like the tools or background to kind of succeed in the real world, as it were.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
always get scared and pull back. And then I would have the thought, get scared and pull back. And so
Yeah.
certainly getting pregnant with my son at the time that I did, I was young, really did force me, I guess, to think, okay, like this is the moment. But then you have the moment, you make the decision, and then the real work begins, right? So
Yeah.
that's always
Yeah.
the interesting thing that people don't
Yeah.
really contemplate.
So tell me, in terms of talking about mental health and mental well-being, what are the common myths that people actually have about mental well-being? One of the things I always think is that does it really exist? Does it only really exist in our heads? Okay, so tell me a bit more about some of the things that are actually out there which are not true in terms of debunking those myths, in terms of what it is and what it isn't.
Sure. Well, first of all, mental health is about all of us. So it's the health
Yeah,
of our mind. It's not just mental illness. If you think of the definition connected to the World Health Organization, it's about how we cope with everyday stress, right?
yeah,
So there's some choices there. It's reaching our potential, feeling fulfilled. So kind of finding meaning and living that good life. So that means it's about all of us. And we know that there are different things that can support us in good mental health. So that
yeah,
might be if you have a community, if you have a healthy workplace, if you have good physical health, if you're able to eat well, sleep well, these foundational pieces affect the state of our mind. And there's more and more research now that literally what you eat can affect how you think, right? So
yeah,
there's lots of components. And then our technology and the influences that are in our brain, all of that is another layer that's probably not in that definition, right? Which is why I
yeah,
wanted to extend it in my
yeah,
book. I think one of the myths is that any mental illness is like a fixed state. It's like saying you have diabetes and this is just what you have and you have to manage forever. It's not always like that. There's more evidence that depression, for example, is there's no evidence suggests that there is a chemical imbalance. This is often the phrase that we think of, and then we get antidepressants, and it makes us think it's just the way it is. It's what I've got, right?
yeah,
When so often, I'd say in 90% of cases, there is lifestyle components. There might be trauma or something that's occurred for us that has then meant we needed to cope in a way that was appropriate at the time, but is less appropriate in day-to-day life, right?
yeah,
So say you have PTSD, being jumpy and looking out for stuff is probably really wise when you're in a war zone or when you're in a traumatic situation. But later on, when you're just at the shops or you're hanging out with your wife and kids, it's less useful, right?
yeah,
So we want to understand the stories that have occurred to people and then go, what are new coping strategies that we can sort of develop? What's the skill? So I think I'm really interested in neuroscience. I'm a bit of a nerd about the whole thing, but how we can continue to develop our neural pathways. That's pretty cool. We didn't know that before. And so
yeah.
that means anyone actually can challenge some of how they feel and I guess take responsibility for their mental health.
Sure, we could actually talk all day about, definitions and everything else, but
Sure.
really in terms of mental health, how you actually react to things. So is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
It might not feel like you have control over it. And someone who
Yeah.
has a mental illness that might be more extreme might feel like they don't have control over some of the, say, intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
However, the skill that we can develop is our actions are connected to that. We
Yeah.
don't have to believe everything we think. This is a
Yeah.
radical concept for many, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just a thought, right? And
Yeah.
so you might not feel like you have control over your thinking, but you can begin to develop the skill of which thoughts you choose to believe and which ones you begin to cultivate. So
Yeah.
thinking positively, gratitude, there's loads of evidence now that can help you develop new neural pathways and
Yeah.
learn to think differently.
Yeah, yeah. And that starts with asking questions, right? In terms of asking a lot deeper questions of yourself, of your understanding. And also, I think, obviously, you talk about digital well-being as well, which we'll touch upon a bit later. So it's all about asking those deeper questions. Is this true? And are my feelings, okay, internal or whether they're external. I mean, if you read on let's say you're on Twitter, which is X as
Uh-huh.
it's called now, and there are some posts on there that make you feel really, really angry. So it's kind of thinking, all right, what am I actually achieving through this anger? Does it really affect me? And what does it actually mean for my own internal? So it's something that you can either, I guess what I'm trying to say is either you control that feeling in the moment when you read it and you park it and you get away from it, or you let it fester.
I mean, this is a big topic because, or
Yeah,
you just switch off X and you
yeah,
don't get into it. So you stop
yeah,
following certain threads that are just
yeah,
giving you a heart condition. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
these days, sometimes you have to look 3 steps before the
yeah,
impact and think, is there any control I could have over that source of influence
yeah,
in the first place?
yeah,
We all know we might have a family member or a work colleague that we
yeah,
hey, we've got to interact with them. It's just part
yeah,
of life, right? So then you're like, okay, I can't control that piece. They're in my
yeah,
world. What do I control around the response? When it comes to social media, the news, clickbait, they call it outrage news, right?
yeah,
Bad
yeah,
news travels 6 times faster than good news.
yeah,
There's like, hey, what do you want to tune into? So for
yeah,
me, I take a few steps before that because otherwise, when you're exhausted, when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, it's actually really hard to not get angry or to respond in a way all the time with like thousands of sort of things that are presenting themselves to you.
yeah.
So I would just start a few steps before. Yeah.
All right, okay. All right. All right. So let's get into the world of work, and especially in the world of exhibitions and event planning,
Yeah.
because I was doing some research before we joined the call, and apparently event planning is the third most stressful career in the world. So, and I can understand why, because event planners have lots and lots of pressures. They're dealing with multiple suppliers. They have to deal with internal stakeholders, everybody wanting to have the say. Then obviously they have the pressure of meeting the budgets. And the biggest factor, I think, for stress is that we have a final deadline. So those deadlines on an event don't actually move. Just because you don't actually have a supplier ready, it doesn't mean that the event organizer will actually change the date of the event.
Sure.
So there's lots and lots of pressure there. So in terms of how do event planners take notice of when they're actually feeling burnout? Where would you actually start to say, right, this is getting a bit out of control? So what kind of advice would you actually give event planners or people in the events industry to say, this is how you have total control over your well-being?
Sure. I mean, it's quite a job to get into, isn't it? And when it goes well, it's very
Yeah,
fulfilling, right? There's lots of
yeah,
reward. I know there's lots of different types of events, but you're like, yes, we did it. You're exhausted, but
yeah,
you achieved something. Maybe you sold stuff, like whatever the event's purpose
yeah,
was, people are
yeah,
happy. So people go into it because they're good at project management or organization and they love that feeling at the end, right? So
yeah,
they kind of like being on the edge a little bit of that
yeah,
kind of, and then the win.
yeah,
Of course, there's plenty of risks. I'm not surprised it's one of the most stressful things. I love that I'm a speaker and I get to swan in at events and just show up
yeah,
and everything's working. And there's a couple of things like people get very stressed, like
yeah,
if the speaker's tech isn't working or if something's
yeah,
that's perhaps out of the event organizer's control, but they get the brunt of somebody's
yeah,
anger or rage, and you have to be the receiver of it when they don't understand the context that someone
yeah,
let you down. You had to do 18 different things before 6 a.m. because someone didn't do it. All the things that happen. But with any type of stressful, high pressure environment, you have to start with your foundation piece. Once you're feeling the signs of burnout, it's not quite too late, but like, oh my goodness, there's more drastic action that you need to take. So we
yeah,
always want to be thinking about the foundation tools for people in those high pressure environments. And it sounds basic, but it's things like, are you able to switch off at
yeah,
some times? Do you recover after the event? So,
yeah,
or is there another one? Boom, 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 right? So
yeah,
often it's like we push ourselves and then you want to recover. You need to have a space afterwards sometimes
yeah,
from the deadline, just for
yeah,
your nervous system to
yeah,
kind of recover and give yourself a bit of space. But you've got to learn to listen to your own body and your own mind because you know what your baseline is. if you're losing your temper with people, if you're making silly mistakes that you never normally would make,
yeah,
if your relationships are suffering because of
yeah,
that irritability, or, there's these different clues that are, if your physical health is suffering, right? So people start getting migraines or backaches or shortness of breath or anxiety or feeling, all of this together are clues that,
yeah,
ooh, we've got to be a bit careful. And,
yeah,
we also need a bit of perspective.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I
yeah,
think you know what I mean. You need a bit of perspective because yes, it can feel like the end of the world, but that's just
yeah,
because your body is in a fight or flight, like urgent
yeah,
survival mode. But on the
yeah,
in the grand scheme of things, if you are healthy, if your family is healthy, if you are, being able to work to the best of your ability. So we need a healthy dose of perspective. But I know
yeah.
I'm throwing lots at you. Is this sort of landing just as far as this group?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think the key one for me is where does this actually fit into the grand scheme of things? So, for example, one thing I always find is, I mean, we've got event planners and the booth, they're building the booth, okay, and there's maybe something hasn't quite gone wrong, quite gone right with the wall decor, for example, or something is missing from the shipment,
Hmm,
and then everybody gets really, really stressed. And I've seen people get red in the face. They've started, kicking and screaming at things and stuff like that. But I always think it's just a scratch. It's just a, thing. It can be replaced. So why actually have all of that anger? I mean, I face it quite a lot. I work with people. We place product demonstrators, we booth hosts and stuff. And when you work with people, I can control quite a few things. Okay, I can make sure that
sure,
I've selected the right people. I can make sure that I've briefed them before the show, and I try to preempt a lot of the issues because if you've been in business for a long time, you know what's actually going to go wrong. Okay,
sure.
but there's one thing that we actually don't have control over, and that is fate and destiny.
Big words. Yeah.
Big words, yeah. So because I can make all the preparations in the world, but what's to stop that person stepping out of the door in the first thing in the morning and having their foot run over by a bus? Okay, nothing. I can't do anything about
No.
that. So I can't control that. The only thing I can do is be ready to take that phone call and be prepared to get a replacement. So that's one thing I've learned over the past 18 years is that I can control that and I can actually control my emotions about the thing. So I don't need to get angry. All I need to do is just say, that's life, it actually happens. So all I can do is actually deal with the situation as professionally as I can, call the client, tell them the bad news and say, I've got a replacement for you. Everything was okay. And then people went late. I actually once had a situation where I was in Dublin. I was there at the site and somebody was stuck in traffic and there was nothing I could do. But the event manager, our client, they were
Hmm.
getting really, really angry because their boss was actually at the event. And so she's under pressure to make sure everything
Yeah.
is on point. Okay.
Sure.
And obviously, if the booth host is late, obviously that adds pressure. And I said to her, "Look, I've just rang her. She sat in traffic. She's in a taxi. Okay, she tried her best to get in on time, but I cannot go and move the traffic so she can actually arrive on time."
Yeah.
Okay, and despite best efforts, traffic jams happen. You can't predict accidents.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So in situations like that, I mean, you need to think, what can I do about it? Is it under my control? Okay. And I think if you have the mentality of calming down and say, it's not under my control, it will be okay. And I think you're in a much better position. You don't get that stress.
So what you're speaking to is, the ninja skill of emotion regulation, which is allowing yourself to notice what's going on and then having a mindset trick, which is like me losing my temper is actually just going to add to the challenge in this situation, which
Yeah.
people don't really realize, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
people feed off of your energy. So if this woman's getting angry, but then you're getting angry and frustrated as well,
Yeah.
nobody is just kind of calming the situation down. And great event organizers are able to stay in that calm place because there's chaos everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's freaking out, but they're able to say, all right, so this is difficult. What is the plan? What can we do? Right. And of course, you've been in the game for a little while, so you know to just separate out what's in your control and what isn't and focus on
yeah,
that. However, people need to realize that you can be the calm one for everybody, but the adrenaline is still in your body. And so I
yeah,
don't know about you, but sometimes after that event, you're going to feel it. So
yeah,
like everything's okay, everything's sorted, you were like ninja level calm, and afterwards you're going to yell at a stranger, or you're going to overeat, or you're going to get start drinking, or like just do things because your body's freaking out later. So people
yeah.
need to realize that what's going on in your nervous system, I guess. I mean, do you still get that, like the aftershock, even if you do, yeah? What happens?
Yeah, leading up to an event because you're working non-stop. This last week was a great example. We have an event starting in Copenhagen. We're allocating staff to about 20 clients, all with different choices. And I think we finalized the order on Friday. So now I've got a bit of calm. And this week, is kind of, do I take some time off? I mean, I normally work on Sundays just to, plan for the week. But this weekend, I purposely took time off and I didn't touch my laptop on purpose because I had an intensive week last week. And once I can remember, we were doing an event in Budapest. And the lead up to the event, it was very, very stressful because we had quite a few pullouts due to sickness. And I actually had a cold as well. So during that week, I went to the event. I still had that cold. I
Yeah,
managed everything. We had lots and lots of things, little bit things. I mean, nothing too taxing that went wrong, but we put them right. But that high of the week leading up to the event,
yeah,
because you're firefighting all the time, and then you're firefighting on the show floor. The week after, I actually had a complete body
gosh,
breakdown because I was completely shattered and I was ill for about 7 days because of all that intensive emotions that I actually was storing up and still trying to stay calm. And I think, and again, one of the key things that you need to do after that intensive is need to get the emotions out. So
absolutely.
whatever you've bottled up, just get them out. And whether it's going for a run, and I think a lot of the events have actually come up with activations like they go for a 5K run, like a group on the first morning of an event, or they'll have a health and well-being zone where you can go and relax as well.
Yeah, well, and to your point earlier about burnout, burnout
Yeah,
is not just the impact of stress. It's the
yeah,
impact of stress that has never been shaken out, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
movement is the single best way to shake it out, but also things like laughter, connection,
yeah,
these sorts of things are all useful, right? So to your point, know yourself. Also understand that you are likely to have a crash afterwards. So
yeah,
don't be like, oh, why am I doing this? I've got to keep working, and force yourself. And recovery can be an hour, it could be half a day, it could be a weekend, it could be taking some time off. It could
yeah.
just be going to the gym or going to a meditation, or it doesn't have to be the ninja level. I'm going to do a hit
Of
class
course.
and then a run and a thing, right? If it works for you, great. But it could be a walk with a friend. So movement, it could be I'm going to binge watch a TV show, but then I'm going
Yeah,
to move, or I'm going to eat well, or I'm going to do
yeah,
something intentional. So I always found, because I get it as well when I'm on stage, right? Because I
yeah,
talk about my personal story, and we call it a vulnerability hangover, where
yeah,
after you've given everything on stage, your body just crashes, and it might even play tricks on you and be
yeah,
like, you might be overthinking the event. You might be like, oh,
yeah,
I can't believe I answered the question in this way, or how did
yeah,
we solve it this way, that someone's going to be upset with me. Like your brain can just be
yeah,
clocking it, and you
yeah,
need the physical movement or the resourcing, whatever it is for you, just to give you a little bit of a window so that you can
yeah,
then come back and go, let's now look logically. Because when
yeah,
you're in an emotional state, you're too like old triggers, old criticisms, all of that comes up. But
yeah,
actually, when you resource yourself, you're able to go, what can we learn from the things that maybe didn't go
yeah,
well? And also, how
yeah,
can we celebrate the wins? People
yeah,
forget to do that bit. And that's really
yeah.
great as a full circle, prevent burnout and kind of manage the stress better.
Your inner critic isn't, going to, nab away at you, say, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. And before you
And it
know it,
takes
yeah,
practice, doesn't it? It
yeah,
takes,
it takes practice.
yeah. I
Yeah,
know I used to have the come down for a whole week. Like it was
yeah,
super long. And I'd be like,
yeah,
you know, And
yeah,
now either I don't have it or maybe it's an hour. Maybe I
yeah,
decide to just, eat some ice cream and chill on the sofa that night and the next
yeah,
day I'm okay. But
yeah,
interestingly, you don't want to discount all of that, the
yeah,
voice in our head, right? And that's
yeah,
where
yeah,
people don't always, they're like, okay, my mindset's powerful. Everything was wonderful. Let's not believe any criticism. There's a
yeah,
difference between the debilitating, you're a bad person
yeah,
criticism and the like, oh man, I can't believe we missed that. Let's
yeah,
actually get together as a team and figure out how we can learn from it moving forward and be super
yeah,
honest. And that's great
yeah,
for team building. I mean, the thing that we haven't gotten into is how important it is to have backup in your team, right?
yeah,
Like when you have a
absolutely, yeah,
strong team, when one person dips, the other
yeah,
person can be backup. And
yeah,
that's like psychological safety, understanding the stressors, trust, right? Isn't that
yeah.
like crucial to
Oh,
getting through it?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the sessions that we do is talk about building a high performance team. And if you look at the sports world, for example, if you look at soccer, if you look at American football, if you look at cricket, you always have 11 players. So let's say soccer, for example, all specialists in their positions,
Hmm.
but five of them could actually have an off day, and sometimes it's that one player that can actually make the difference, score the goal or save a penalty that can actually save the team. But if you can get all 11 players in tandem, having a great match, but that never actually happens. Somebody always has an off day, and somebody else can actually make that difference. And it's the same in a high performing team in event planning as well. But there might be periods on the show floor where somebody isn't feeling well, they're actually having that crash, okay, where somebody else can actually come in and say, let me take over and that. So it's really important to have each other's backs and work as a team where one of the pressures that event planners have is that they answer to multiple stakeholders. So you have the marketing team, they want
Hmm.
to do their own thing, and then you have the sales team, okay, and they want to meet their sales targets, and then you have the executive team or the C-level suite directors who actually want to put even more pressure on by being present at the event as well. So how would you deal with that?
Well, about the event pressure, but then not
Yeah,
necessarily taking into account, I just had a fight with my boyfriend, or my child
yeah,
is sick, or
yeah,
I've been watching the news and I couldn't sleep all night, or,
yeah,
the life pressures that are
yeah,
also affecting people. And
yeah,
then you show up in an environment where you think everyone's got it covered, but you don't
yeah,
know that someone just went through something, or their mother's sick, or, we often don't factor in the surrounding things. So
yeah,
the more we can know each other as a team, as people,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not just the
yeah,
tasks that we have to execute on.
yeah,
That
yeah,
really helps us then go, I know you didn't sleep well, like I got you. Let me step up, right? But we
yeah,
need that
yeah,
communication and openness there. And it really does start with self-awareness. It's the
yeah,
people who are in the job that they love that are
yeah,
going to push in the ways that because it's a flow state, they get a buzz out of it even if it's not always perfect.
yeah,
And hey, if you've got the wrong fit in a job, right, and
yeah,
they prefer to be behind a desk and to be in a different environment, that type of stress just doesn't suit them. Just like sales, right? Some of us, we thrive under the sales pressure and the you've got 30 minutes, like do this thing, right? And other people are like, oh, the
yeah,
close, it's terrifying. Find the fit. I think I mean,
yeah,
you've been in the industry so long, obviously, because it's a fit for you, and you're
yeah,
able to like regulate and get the buzz and all of that. And for other people, they might not. But stress is not the problem.
yeah,
Stress, if you think of an athlete, like you said,
yeah,
pushing
yeah,
to a race or a limit or the Olympics, whatever, that's what you wake up for is that
yeah,
stress. But it's how we respond, and you're not running the Olympics every day.
yeah,
That's what people don't realize, right? That's
yeah,
every 4 years. The World Championships is every two, I believe, or however it goes. And so you need the push zones, and then you need to reflect. And
yeah,
if you're in burnout,
yeah,
even if you have a day off, your body is not resting. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah,
those times
absolutely,
when you're still buzzing and you're like you can't rest and and so that's a little warning sign as well. If I have time off but I'm frazzled and I don't
yeah,
feel rested when I come back, we've got
yeah,
to take a step back and see what to do
yeah.
there.
Oh, absolutely. Just going back to the points that you mentioned about knowing your people, one of the best leadership tips I ever got. You know, if you work in a team, the person on your team that leaves the workplace at 5 o'clock on a Friday is not the same person that comes back on Monday at 9 a.m. Okay. And
Wow.
that says a lot,
Yeah.
really, because if you have, they go into a different environment, they go into their family, something might have actually happened that triggers something. So they actually come back a different person. It's the same in events as well. Okay. They
Yeah.
might have something, they saw something on site which has triggered, some emotions inside them, and they stop performing. So we all have triggers, and especially in an event environment where you have so many factors like multisensory factors. So because you have like big screens, you have different colors, you have lots of motion going on.
Yeah.
So imagine if you're a quieter person and all of a sudden you're exposed to this noisy environment, where lots of people, where you're not used to talking to them, and then you're expected to perform, you're expected to talk to people, and if it's not your day-to-day thing, obviously you're going to get very high levels of stress.
I mean, you are, and that's like you might be more introvert, you might be more extrovert, you might be neurodivergent, and so lights
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
noise affects you in a different way. But again, that's why it starts with self awareness, because the way you set the foundation might be different, and the way you recover might be different, right?
yeah,
So the more you
yeah,
know yourself, it doesn't mean you can't be in those environments, but it
yeah,
does mean if you're neurodivergent, you might need the 5 minute breaks to just
yeah,
put some headphones on or go get a little bit of sensory protection and let your team know, like, hey, I just need my 5 minutes, but you can still be ace at your job, right? And
yeah,
equally, if you're more introvert and that many people and noise, your recovery time might be just a cave, right? Where
yeah,
you just
yeah,
need the lights dimmed, you need to watch a show, read a book, sleep, whatever, right? And
yeah,
someone else might really want to go to the pub and hang out with their mates and blow off some steam that way because they actually, so the more you know yourself, the better. And again, certain environments will be different for different people, like you said.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. So let's just change tact for a minute or so. Let's look at, obviously, we've looked at the event planner's perspective, but let's look at the event attendee's perspective, okay? Because that, again, is one of the most stressful things, that if you're going to an event, okay,
Yeah.
then most often of the time you will actually be in a stress mode because, you're leaving the office, so you've got the work pressures on your shoulders as you travel to an event. You're maybe going to a different country, okay, so you're in a different environment, different culture, okay.
Yeah.
Then you go into an event, okay, and then you're being exposed to those multisensory experiences, so that is even more stress to deal with. And the point I'm trying to get at is, obviously, you probably think that, oh my God, events is one of the most stressful things ever. You've got event planners that are stressed, you've got event attendees that are stressed, okay? How do we even like make this into an industry? But the key thing is, it's for event planners is to understand that event attendees are also under stress. Okay, so what kind of tips and tactics would you suggest for event planners to actually understand how stressed the event attendees are?
Well, there's different types of stress, right? And so
Yeah,
if you're the attendee, I would always think, what is my intention in
yeah,
attending this event, right?
yeah,
Is it
yeah,
to network? Is it to find new suppliers? Is it to attend some talks, right? And I always like to have a really small intention because then anything else is a bonus. So,
yeah,
like I might say, I'm going to meet 3 new people and
yeah,
learn about them. So, curiosity, right? And that's
yeah,
going to be a skill I'm going to practice. Or I'm going to attend 2 talks or whatever it might be. And so
yeah,
I feel like in this day and age where there's so much that is remote or hybrid, the
yeah,
skill of interaction, we've discussed this, haven't we?
yeah,
The
yeah,
skill of interaction is scarier for people.
yeah,
Whereas, it's just like shake your hand. Hey, how's it going? Ask a
yeah,
question. It's quite
yeah,
simple because we do it all the time, right?
yeah,
But if you set an intention for what you're there for, why you're there, it doesn't
yeah,
have to be stressful. It's
yeah,
just like you can switch stress to excitement, right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like, oh, a new experience. I might learn something new. I might, and if not, fine. Like that's already the perspective shift. And so for somebody who's welcoming attendees and, on
yeah,
that side of the, you don't know how people are experiencing that day, right?
yeah,
And I think if we can just spread a little bit of optimism, a little bit of connection,
yeah,
seeing people, valuing people, like these are the skills that make people light up. So
yeah,
long before you're sales or your clothes or your this, that, and the
yeah,
other. What's your intention about how you want to show up? So not what you
yeah,
want to say or what you want to close, but who do I want to be? And you
yeah,
can see I'm like pulling my shoulders back and just like imagining that you're going to stand differently. You're going to do eye contact. You're going to say somebody's name. You're going to
yeah,
maybe ask a more creative question than how was your train journey in, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you might just say, "Hey, what's one thing that you're trying to get out of today?" or what
yeah,
excites you about this topic, right?
yeah,
So it's just I think it's an opportunity to practice skills
yeah,
that are and to see what that experience is like. So already that intention and how you hold yourself is totally different than, oh my god, we've got 8 hours and there's going to be this many people, and if I don't do this, this is going to happen, like
yeah,
catastrophic thinking. So
yeah,
somebody might be coming out there really optimistic that they can get out of their house and they
yeah,
can actually just see people, right? So
yeah.
don't assume, and just show up in a way that brings a little light into the world, I think.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned something just then, and I smiled because I used to practice this quite a bit in the early days of my when I set up the business, and that is catastrophic thinking. What if things go wrong? And again, when you work with people, obviously there's lots of things that could actually go wrong. But how do you actually stop that your mind from catastrophic thinking? Because sometimes as a business owner, because you have so many pressures, a lot of things you think you start with one thing, and then that leads to another thing, and then that leads to something else,
Before you
and
know it, you're
before you know it,
homeless.
mind blown, right? So, what tips do you have? And I guess a lot of event planners do it as well, because if they've got multiple suppliers, a lot of peer pressure as well. They're thinking about the outcomes. They're thinking about, their objectives and things like that. If they don't, if they're not good enough and things like that. So when do you know that you're catastrophizing, and where do you start to stop it?
Well, there's a difference between risk assessing
Yeah,
and catastrophic thinking. So,
yeah,
of course, you need to risk assess and think, okay, if this
yeah,
doesn't happen, what's our backup? Have we
yeah,
got enough people on the floor? Have we, you've got to risk assess, obviously. But when's the last time you asked yourself, what if it went right? What would
yeah,
that look like? Nobody asks themselves this. And I'm like, oh, a really good day would look like this, this, and this, right?
yeah,
And so then you can celebrate against that. But often
yeah,
we don't. So
yeah,
just know, like, we want balance. So we do want to risk
yeah,
assess, and then we want to bring up our teams, like a bit of inspiration and
yeah,
almost visualizing. If we think of athletes, they visualize the
yeah,
win. So are
yeah,
we picturing and visualizing what if it went right? How would we
yeah,
feel? What would happen? And part of it might be if something happens that we risk assessed that
yeah,
went wrong, this is how we're going to show up. We're going to
yeah,
show up calm, we're going to be solution focused, we're going to be supportive of other people. Like it's not preventing everything that goes wrong, but it's like, who are we going to be when little glitches do occur? Because
yeah,
that's the win. That's when the team comes together through the challenge and wins anyway, right?
yeah,
So it
yeah,
really is a mindset, and it takes practice. And if
yeah,
you are a catastrophic thinker by habit, give yourself a time limit. Be like,
yeah,
okay, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to think of
yeah,
everything that could go wrong. I'm going to put a
yeah,
timer on my phone. And once that timer's done, I have to I have to mention 3 things I'm grateful for, or 3 things that could go right.
yeah,
So do you see how it's like
yeah,
slowly, maybe you reduce the catastrophic thinking and suddenly you're
absolutely,
like,
yeah,
I mean, I imagine you risk assess, but then you go, all right,
yeah,
guys, we're going to win this.
yeah,
Right? It's
yeah.
like
Oh,
it's a
absolutely, yeah,
practice. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we always think of the positive. I mean, one thing I took from the early days is that, like, again, there are things that I control and things that I don't control. Okay, so and I think that's always my starting point, is really looking at what are the things that I have control over and what are the things I don't have any control over, and I stopped doing that.
What helped you develop that skill though? Because I imagine you were not just born this way.
No, no. I think it was just practice. And as you can see from my back, I have lots of books.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my favorite is, and I think you've probably read this because I saw a reference to it in one of your books, is Time to Think
Beautiful.
by Nancy
Nancy
Klein.
Klein.
I think that for me has always given me a lot of knowledge in terms of really taking a step back and actually asking those questions, those deeper questions and rational questions that help me kind of focus back again onto the what the actual issue is, and not what my catastrophic thinking is allowing me to, you know, interpret. So I think that really put me in a really good shape. So when you work with people, you always have to think the best of them, not the worst of them.
And the time to think really is a structure around reflection, right?
Yeah,
So even if you
absolutely. Yeah,
have gone to catastrophic thinking, you might reflect and go, did that really help us do better?
yeah,
Or did
yeah,
it just stress us out so much that we didn't do as well, right?
yeah.
And so
Oh,
having that
absolutely. Yeah,
honest reflection that is about learning a growth mindset, so which
yeah,
is different than you're a terrible person and you never get it right, that kind
yeah.
of voice. It's
Oh,
more like,
absolutely.
if we were to do this next time, what might we do different? Have some reflection. And then time to think is also about having sounding boards, right? So it's
Yeah,
like you
absolutely. Yeah,
can listen without fixing, without telling, but just create space for you to reflect out loud. It's really powerful tools just to learn some of that.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think so many innovations have come out of that process of thinking as well, in terms of our booking process, things that we've actually improved over the years. So,
Amazing.
even if something bad happened, we always ask, what is the learning point here? What can we do better next time? Okay, so it's
Right.
not always when things go wrong. And again, the other thing is, for me, is communication, very clear communication. So, again, when we're talking about mental health, is to communicate to other people how you're really feeling. And if people are actually expecting things from you, but you're not in the right frame of mind to actually deliver them, then they need to know that. Because if they do know that, then obviously they can have a plan B, plan C, or you can actually buy more time as well. Okay, so I think that's quite important. What do you think in terms of what role communication plays with other people?
I mean, it's huge, especially in
Yeah.
events, right? Where
Yeah, yeah,
every bit of detailed communication helps someone else do their job well and back you up. Of course, it takes trust when it comes to, hey, I'm not on full form today. That's
yeah,
tough because people want to be seen as they're on full form. They think they can fake it. And a little
yeah,
bit we can, right?
yeah,
But with my team, they know, like, I experience PTSD symptoms because of some of the things that have happened for me.
yeah,
And I will say to them, guys, I didn't sleep well and I had a trigger, and there's like an aftershock for me for a few
yeah,
hours.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
I'm not in my best headspace, and we then we adjust. Like, is it
yeah,
something that I can take a break from, or is it something? And because I do that as the CEO,
yeah,
other people do that as well. And it
yeah,
doesn't always mean you need to take over for me. It's just the fact that I've said it just means
yeah,
that we have this feeling of backup. And it might mean that my recovery, so we all hit the deadline, and guys, I got to recover now. So
yeah,
that piece afterwards happens. So just that openness and modeling it as a leader,
yeah,
absolutely important. But in a world where there's a lot of restructures and change,
yeah,
it can feel really difficult because a group starts forming and trusting each other, and then someone leaves and someone else comes in and something else changes. And now we're all a bit discombobulated, and we're like, we almost
yeah,
have to start from ground zero again.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
really important to know that, to name it, and then go, hey guys, the team's different now.
yeah,
Just like someone might be different over the weekend, right? The
yeah,
team is
yeah,
now different. What do we need to do now? Right. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
the
yeah.
transparency in the real world can be tricky.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Petra, just to recap everything in terms of what would be a really good mental health strategy. So, if you recap everything that we've actually talked about in terms of um, three top tips, if you could actually give the event planners out there, event attendees, and event CEOs, managing directors out there, C-level suite managers, what would be the three key tips in terms of making sure that your team's mental well-being is always at the top level?
I mean, the first step is self awareness, right? So
Yeah,
ask yourself really honestly, how do you manage stress? Not how do
yeah,
you get rid of stress, but how do you manage it? And then as
yeah,
a team, discuss, how do you manage stress? How do you work at your best? What helps you? So the
yeah,
more we have this normalized conversation, the more that we can back each other up when the shit hits the fan, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
self
Yeah,
awareness, build team trust. So how can you support
yeah,
each other? And then these days, check your foundation, check your influences. What are you listening to? What are your health practices? If those are beginning to slip, you need to either readjust them, because sometimes
Yeah.
we need one thing more than others, which is fine,
Yeah.
but really have some conscious awareness about what is in your control, to use your point.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
can I do to invest in myself in order to manage the stress when it does show up? And then, of course, get my books. You
Yeah.
know, you want to learn about digital well-being, check out the recent one. And my first one's on mental health at work. So please
Yeah.
do check those out.
So what inspired your first book?
My first book is a lot of my story. So being raised
Yeah.
in a cult and my own addictions and depression
Yeah.
and things, and like what sort of helped me. And then moving into how do we create movements for change within culture. So I get into, I
Yeah.
guess, my manifesto.
Yeah.
And so it was very personal, you know, as far as what I wanted to say and what I was doing in businesses anyway.
Yeah.
And the second one is, hey, I've got Gen Z kids. We're all in a world of addiction. It's addiction again, which
Yeah.
I'm 16 years sober, but it's addiction
Yeah.
of dopamine and all these things in the
Yeah.
digital space. So it
Yeah.
felt really relevant to go into, again, to think, how do I do this for myself and my family, but then
Yeah.
in our workplace for productivity, and then just for overall well-being, because, hey, AI is not going anywhere. Technology is moving faster. Do we move faster, or do we
Yeah.
get to slow down and use AI to enable efficiencies? So,
Yeah.
I mean, lots of research, lots of top tips in there.
Absolutely brilliant. Petra, it was a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much for your time. And where can we find you?
Sure.
Or
I
where
mean,
can our listeners find you?
please, yeah. So LinkedIn is the place where I post loads of content. And then my website's just my name, petravelzeboer.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up nicely today's conversation with the brilliant Petra. I hope you found her insights as valuable as I did. Now, from this episode, there were 3 key takeaways for me. Number 1, self-awareness is key. Know your stress triggers and be honest about how you manage them. Number 2, recovery is not a luxury, it's essential. Whether it's movement, laughter, or downtime, you need to shake out the stress before it builds into burnout. And number 3, team trust makes the difference. When people have each other's backs, it creates psychological safety and the resilience to handle whatever comes your way. Now, if you'd like to dive deeper into Petra's work, check out her books, Begin With You and Digital Wellbeing, available at all good bookshops. And you can also connect with Petra on LinkedIn or visit her website listed in the episode summary. Thanks again for listening to the Expo Factor. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a colleague who might need a little support in managing the pressures of event life. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, the difference between a good show and a brilliant show always starts with people and the mindset.